A lot of times we go through life feeling satisfied. We settle for being good. But why settle for good when you can be incredible? We gonna work on going from good to incredible.
So special.
Feeling like your life is falling. Feeling like your faith is going down. We here to lift you up. Looking for the one that's trying to find God. Trying to spread the word before the time is gone. Before the time is gone.
Welcome to another week of Good to Incredible podcast. I am your host, Dr. Estraica Lanett. Last week we spoke about love, how to receive and then give love. This week we will discuss resilience, its characteristics, examples of resilience, and how to develop resiliency in life. Let's get to incredible. When I spoke in the introductory episode about life being easy when you learn how to live it, just for clarity purposes, it wasn't to say that, things doesn't come up or life doesn't happen. What that meant is, and what it still actually means is, when you have the tools, when you have the mindset to get through trials and tribulations in life, guess what? When things come up, you know how to deal with it. It doesn't become a whole song and dance. You're not falling out. You're not, having a mental breakdown. You're not doing any of those things because you have built such a resiliency for the unknown. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. None of us know when life will happen. All we can do is get up every single day and do our best. So having that capacity to recover quickly from any type of difficulty or, toughness momentarily, that is always temporary, is resiliency. What if I told you that there was a time that I lacked resilience? Don't get me wrong, being born to a teenage mom, being born and raised in the projects, you have to have a level of grit to get through any situation. I can recall after becoming a mom, not having a babysitter. And at this time, I was behind the chair as a stylist, and I had either, a family member watching on my side, watching, my children, or I would have to sometimes split them up on a Saturday. And because I have two separate fathers, one would go with, my mom's side of the family. And, my youngest son would then go with his aunt, or my sister, who we would like swap kids. By the way, it is very, 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 very important to have a village where, if you have children and they have children, you all can kind of, swap kids to give each other a break. So that's essentially, what happened. And I just remember at times it would be like, I don't know, something would come up or I would decide, okay, well, I'll go over here because I kind of want them to stay together and, pay someone to, babysit while I worked. I think Saturdays I used to work like 9 to 3. Anyway, I remember one particular weekend I didn't have a babysitter. And for whatever reason, and of course I learned, later on what the reason was, but I'll definitely share that with you. But I sat on the edge of the bed because I didn't have a babysitter, and I cried. And it's like, okay, you're crying, and what is that supposed to solve? So I sat there and I was crying because, I couldn't go to work. And, I felt like the whole world was coming down, which of course later on I realized I just had horrible hormonal imbalance a week before my cycle. Anyway, in the moment I had no idea of any of this. So I'm crying, and of course I'm praying and I'm talking to God about like feeling like the whole world is on my shoulders, and here I am trying to do, what's best and provide for my kids, and nobody's there to help me and all these other, manner of things. And here I am now, like, what am I going to do? And I heard the Holy Spirit speak and tell me, go to bed. Don't worry about it. You will have a babysitter. So of course, I heeded his word. I laid down and I went to bed. And of course, the next morning, I made a phone call, or maybe even two. And like, he said, I had a babysitter. And what I learned from that one situation is, number one, it really wasn't even a situation, because I was just being dramatic. But the big thing that I learned from that was, number one, crying doesn't solve anything, even though sometimes it can just feel like it's one thing after the next thing after the next thing. So let me just release it via tears and pray that, things, get better miraculously. But the reality of that situation was I had to learn to just get strong, to have that grit. No, things don't work out exactly as planned, but at the same time, as long as I plan, things will always work out. So from there on, I decided, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about a babysitter if I don't have one the night before. Although my intentions, began to be, okay, let me just plan, where they'll go and who they'll be with. And of course, sometimes people either got busy or, reneged, or whatever the situation was. God always worked it out for me. I have another example. I remember with my grandmother who, my paternal grandmother who raised me. I always told her, and I think I shared this with you all before, that if she died, I'm dying. I remember telling her that I was 6 years old. I will never forget this. I'm like, Mom, I'm jumping in the casket with you. I called her Mom because, of course, she raised me. So that's, kind of what you call the person that raised you, your mom. So I told her that. But then, of course, I'm big and pregnant a month before, not even a month, like a few weeks or a couple weeks before I was having my second son. And at that time, I was 19. And my grandmother, passed away, and it was very unexpected, although it was unexpected to us, but it wasn't really unexpected to her because she knew, but she kept it from the family, even though I was the one. I'm very ignorant, by the way, to everything at this time. I was very self-centered and very all about me. So even going to the doctor, it was like, everything the doctor said, it didn't register. And of course, she kind of made him, hush, keep everything on the hush hush. So of course, I didn't know what was going on. So anyway, grandmother dies, and I wailed like a baby. Like I remember just, she hadn't passed away yet, but she was, moments away from dying, and she died in the house. And I just remember wailing, and I just released it, and all was well. And don't get me wrong, it took me probably about maybe like 8 months to really like stop crying every day. And of course it was a selfish cry, because when people pass away, that's what we do, we cry. But my biggest thing was, I think, because she was literally my number one cheerleader. She cheered for me with everything that I've ever accomplished. She always told me, baby, you can have anything you want as long as you're willing to work for it. And then, once she passed away, and I was living with her, by the way, when she passed away. And then, I moved with my sister, and then I got my own place. And I tell you, in getting my own place, knowing that if I decided today or tomorrow, hey, I want to go and, do drugs, or I wanted to go and just do me and not be a mom or anything like that, I had no one that would get me back on track. Because, there's a different level of, love that your parents have for you, in opposed to, siblings or family members or anything like that. Because I do believe that people are very, not saying that people want to tiptoe around you, but you do have people who would essentially just let you be. No one's like checking you. No one's like, like making sure that you're okay or anything like that. So at least that wasn't my experience. So I knew it was just me and the Holy Spirit, and it was us that had to make the right decisions. There was no person there to hold me accountable or anything like that. So that's when I made the decision to 100% commit my way and allow God to live through me, per se. And this was more so like a 70% type situation, because like I told you later on, 2009, I think I was like 23, or no, I'm sorry, I was 24 turning 25 when I made the like 100% decision. So like I said, I was probably like 70% when I realized that my resilience had to kick in. Living a life of resiliency had to be my portion, because if it was not, then guess what? I wouldn't have been able to be the parent that I needed to be. So fast forward 13 years, I began to live in such a way that life was on autopilot, if that makes any sense. It was so amazing how God did things, because he literally showed me how to live and how to be, and not have it to a point where I struggle emotionally. Don't get me wrong, which we'll talk about that in, later episodes. But when I say struggle emotionally, I mean struggle when things come up. It was literally like driving a car going from one red light to the next red light to the next red light. You're not going to huff and puff. You're not going to cry. You're not going to do any of those things when life happens. When the red light happens, you just sit at the red light. Once it turns green, to go. So for me, I had gotten so good at being the adult that didn't allow any trial or tribulation to delay anything that's supposed to happen, to cause me to get into my emotions and, fall into a depression or anything like that. I had a situation where I had gotten into an accident. I was actually in nursing school, pre-nurse, doing those prerequisites. And I had gotten into an accident on my way to anatomy and physiology 2 at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I was supposed to be there at 8. And I rented a car. I got the police there, rented a car, and was back in class at 12 o'clock the very same day, because I knew that life does not wait for me. Life waits for none of us. Fast forward even more to 2014. I wish I can tell you that resiliency was at the top of my list. However, it kind of took me out for a little while. So let me explain. So 2014, I went through a divorce. And I was always one of those people who said, oh, I'm only getting married one time. And what happens between, whatever happens is between you and God. That's what I would say, just in general, as far as my husband is concerned. But because I knew, my situation, and I knew, I had married the wrong person, amazing person, but just wasn't amazing for me, I knew I needed to get out of the marriage. And of course I did. And sometimes we make decisions that are more hurtful. However, they're necessary, right? And when I got that divorce, I remember being I was just so distraught. I was in the fetal position in my room for a week straight in the corner, just crying my eyeballs out and, doing all of that. And of course I was still going to work, and still, and at that time I was a bedside RN, and I still went to work. I still made things happen. I still took care of my kids. But of course, I just remember being in Sam's Club one day, and I saw Honey Nut Cheerios, and of course, I broke down in the middle of the aisle because, that was a cereal he liked to eat, and, just things like that. And what got me out of that, which I think I want to say I went through that maybe 2 weeks. And 2 weeks for me is a very, very, very long time to go through something, considering, for me, I might give a situation hour, maybe 4 hours, 12 hours max, if that. And I think I'm exaggerating when I say 12 hours. Anyway, but what got me out of that was when Meghan Markle, who was a divorcee, married a prince. Because in my mind, I was damaged goods. I remember telling someone that I felt like the can, okay, you go to the grocery store. I don't eat canned vegetables or canned anything. I'm lying. I do eat canned black beans because they take too long to cook. But anyway, and I might eat some canned black eyed peas. Don't judge me. But anyway, you go down the canned food aisle, and you see this can that's like damaged. It has the dent on it. So when you're picking up or picking out a can, you don't want the one with the dent. You just don't want it. That's how I felt after my divorce. I felt like damaged goods. But then when Meghan Markle, coming from where she came from, with the history she had, married the prince, that gave me so much hope. That literally strengthened me, and every single day I began to get stronger and stronger, and my mindset, it began to just, and of course, praying and talking to God, and and which we'll talk about that in further episodes on how I even manifested my divorce, but we'll talk about that. But that's another story for another episode. Anyway, and the level of resiliency that it took to get me out of that place of feeling damaged, where now I can say, oh, I was married and divorced with a level of pride. I mean, if that makes sense. I mean, I know I shouldn't be, proud to say I've been married and divorced, because, being divorced is like, I guess it's kind of frowned upon in some cultures. However, I can admittedly say, hey, I married the wrong person, like the end, So how do we get to a place in our lives that resiliency is a part of our being? Well, I have so many people who quit everything they start. Just quit. Something happens, they quit. And if that's you, then resiliency isn't a part of your being. Resiliency isn't a priority. And sometimes, you probably don't even know that you're not being resilient, because again, the default mechanism or the default action is to just stop what you're doing and, pivot into something else, or, wallow in whatever the situation is until, you come out, and then never essentially get back to what you were doing prior to quitting. To answer the question, never have a plan B. And I'm going to say that again. Never have a plan B. Because as a human being, our minds are so adaptable to the point where we take the path of least resistance. We default to doing what's easier because it's easier. So without a plan B, guess what happens? Everything can happen, and you're still going to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Now, this is only effective if it was God that gave you plan A, which means you really have to seek God for every plan, for every decision. When we're maneuvering through life, it may seem as if, we make decisions and then we get God to get on board, which it is not even that it seems like, because a lot of times that's what happens. And then we realize, oh my goodness, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have made this decision, or whatever it is. And we keep trying to make things happen, and it just does not happen. And when you know that that's your situation, you have to pause and then pivot. Because at this point, that's not even about resilience. It's about being ignorant. And let's just call a spade at this point. So I tell you, when it's God Who's giving you the plan A? Never have a plan B. Because what happens when you create a plan B, that's saying that you're already setting yourself up for failure. That's saying you're not trusting God. You have no confidence or competence in yourself for yourself. So, hey, let me just go ahead and just in case this doesn't work out, or just in case I can't make this happen, or, this doesn't happen. Resiliency is a muscle that has to be built. From one issue to the next trial, to the next issue, to the next disappointment, you get stronger and stronger and stronger each and every time. And before long, resiliency is going to be a part of your being. Nothing and no one will be able to stop you. Life will become so effortless no matter what's happening in your life. You will be able to move and flow and go with a smile, unscathed, no matter the issue. Allow me to leave you with this. Never have a plan B, because plan A always works. Thank you for joining me for another week of Good to Incredible podcast. And until next time, be incredible. I love you, and God loves you best.